probably the biggest ban list we've gotten in a long time, and we haven't needed a ban list this badly for even longer. So, did it fix the game? Let's get the generic stuff out of the way first, then we can talk about all the decks that were affected. Because in preemptive hits to some FTKs, Samsara can be involved in some FTKs, so they wanted to prevent it before it became popular. But to be honest with you, it feels like somebody told them that Samsara was a problem and they didn't understand which one they were talking about. Bad reaction to Samochi is basically the same thing as a nurse, so they wanted to make sure it couldn't ever make a comeback with both this and the nurse ban. Cup of Ace used to be thought of as a meme card since it's only Pot of Greed some of the time and the rest of the time it's a -3 in card advantage, but Duel Links has proven this doesn't really matter because people are going to use it anyway if they want to draw their whole deck. So they limited this to 1 to make that harder, and they limited it Into the Void and cards to the Sky to 3 so they couldn't be played together, though Into the Void was also being played by Sky Strikers as a consistency piece and as a way to get some more spells into the grave, so that sucks for them if they wanted to play any limited to 3 cards. Summon Breaker has been limited to 1 in terms of generically using it. It can't use it in any deck that has a card limited to 1 anymore, and that includes the people that happen to play Terraforming as a way to get their deck's own field spell, or playing 1 copy of this in case they already open their field spell. They can't do that anymore since Terraforming is limited to 1 too. Blue Eyes might still play this though. Speaking of Blue Eyes, Heat Wave was outright banned, as it should be. Good riddance, no more win button for you. I think a lot of people wanted this deck to be hit harder, and that's understandable, but there are a lot of decks that are going to have a higher win rate against this deck now that they can't max out on Summon Breaker and now that they can't win button with Heat Wave. Phantom Knights is in shambles right now. Ophion and their rank up magic were both limited to 1, so of course they can't use Rhoda anymore, but that's not a big deal. The big deal is that they don't really get to do the Ophion play anymore unless they sacrifice the Requiem play, and the Ophion by itself isn't really good enough of a board, and that's been proven with the fact that even though Evil Swarm can make it consistently turn 1, they can't do anything else, so it's not good enough. You might think, okay, instead of Ophion, they'll just go into another rank 4. That could work, except that the skills make it so that you can only use 1 Xyz effect on the opponent's turn. So it's pretty much gonna have to be Requiem, and any other Xyz you summon has to be a Floodgate or it's not gonna work. Basically, Phantom Knights got screwed, but they can still put up 2 disruptions pretty easily when they're interrupted. Their OTK capabilities are just as good, and they will probably have more deck space for generic cards now as well. I was being a little bit hyperbolic when I said Phantom Knights got screwed. They're alright, but Agents is punching the air and kicking rocks. I don't think we've ever seen this many cards getting limited to 1 for a single deck before. They have Master Flare Hyperion limited to 1 already, and that's important for them to be able to make their plays, but now they can't use Ancient Fairy Dragon to search for a field spell. They can't use Captain Roland, and because of that they can't use Charles. They can't use Herald of Greenlight, so they aren't negating spells on turn 0. They can't use Invincible, so no more anti-spell Floodgate, and even though Ancient Fairy can't be used, they can't use Summon Breaker regardless. And what's more, they even got a skill nerf. First of all, your extra deck can't have any duplicates in it. This is a bit random. There were a couple of people playing 2 Pluto, but that wasn't really the problem thing about the deck. Previously, the skill made it so you couldn't special summon anything except Agents, Hyperions, Synchros, and Normals, but now you also can't normal summon anything except for those, in case they want to get frisky and search for Angel 07. Previously, they got to send 2 monsters from deck to grave. Now they only get to send 1, and by doing so, they don't get to put the Sanctuary into their deck anymore, so if they want to search the Sanctuary, they gotta actually play it in their deck. Foolish Burialing 1 card, while not as good as 2 cards, is still really good considering you can do it for free. The search effect that used to let you shuffle back a Hyperion or normal monster now only shuffles back Hyperion monsters, so if you brick on balls, you're just gonna have to live with it. And then it doesn't search for just any agent, it only searches for Hyperions or specifically Creation, so you're going to need to play more copies of the agents that you relied on a skill for to search for you. Finally, the part of the skill that shuffles monsters from grave back to the deck to make 2 fairies on the board into tuners now doesn't shuffle anything back, so you don't get free recursion, and now only lets you make 1 of your monsters into a tuner. This is a hell of a lot of hits for the deck, and to keep it a buck with you, this archetype had no business getting a skill in the first place, let alone one this good. This is a well-designed, perfectly functionable archetype in the TCG. There was literally no reason to give this deck a skill to fix its flaws, because like the only flaw the deck has is you can brick on balls, but for some reason somebody at Duel Links thought it would be a good idea to give it a double Foolish Burial, an anti-brick mechanic that searches for literally anything you need, recursion, and bonus tuners as if this deck doesn't have its own tuners. Konami really messed up, and I'm not gonna lie to you, even though the card hits mean that this deck is going to be completely different, I still think the skill is too good. You shouldn't get a Foolish Burial in a deck that's already got good cards. You shouldn't get such easy consistency in a deck that already has good consistency, and you shouldn't get bonus tuners in a deck that doesn't have any issues getting tunered. That said, I have no idea what this deck is going to look like moving forward, or even if there is anything left that they can do to save themselves. I just think that if a deck is already well designed in the TCG, they shouldn't be getting a super powerful skill unless that good TCG design doesn't translate well into Duel Links. After all that yapping, let's talk about Dragon Link for a second. This deck is actually more popular than Agents, even with all of the super powerful stuff Agents can do. And it's because this deck is supercharged for going second, which is insane in a Floodgate meta like the one we've been in. But hey, Ophion's gone, Invincible is gone, and Summon Breaker is gone. That's actually gonna give a bunch of other decks a chance to rise up and see how they fit into the new meta, and it might be the Dragon Link is the most popular because of its good matchups against Floodgates. But perhaps the other decks rising up might give this deck more to worry about. I'm not entirely sure because this deck is still really strong, but they limited their fusion spell to 3, meaning that if you play it, you can only play 2 Levianeer. And if you want to play Ibli, then you can only play 1 Levianeer. Ibli might not be worth it in the deck anymore, especially since a lot of people weren't playing Ibli in the first place anyway. Don't worry though guys, the guide for the deck is still on the way. A bunch of decks got buffed though, that's pretty nice, but the first I want to talk about is Cyber Dragons, because people have been harping for Cyber Dragons to get buffed for years. They put Overflow to 1 where it was at 2 before, so that it can be played alongside the fusion spell. This is going to be the biggest slap in the face Cyber Dragon players have gotten in the game, taking their main form of interruption from 2 to 1 and calling it a buff. We had 5 cards in the deck that could access this, and now we have 4, and they expect us to think this is a good thing. It would have been better to put the fusion spell to 1 if they wanted us to play them together. They've essentially buffed us by nerfing our consistency, and I think that's really shitty. They better be giving us Cyber Dragon support soon to validate this. Mech Knights got the love that Cyber Dragon didn't though. They're pretty much back to the same consistency they had when they were meta, because memory's at 2, meaning you can play it alongside Purple Nightfall. The deck's looking clean as hell, but it is a Floodgate deck, and it's got its consistency back, and it's still really good at going second, so watch out for this deck. It might be a real contender. BLS got their Envoy Unlimited. All this means pretty much is that they can play the same way they did before, like exactly the same. With Crackdowns and the Endymion and the Ninaruru, BLS is back to its full strength, and I think that they did this because they felt the game was strong enough now to be able to handle it, but I think it'll be a good deck for ranked if you're a fan of it. Earth Machines finally got Citadel Unlimited, and that pretty much means that they get to play Limit 3 traps now like Ice Dragon's Prison. And that was kind of the main difference between Earth Machine and pure Infinitrax, because Infinitrax could play the IDP in formats that needed it, but with this new buff, you can just play Earth Machines with IDP if you want, and still have your max power. Tenyi only ever got a slap on the wrist on the ban list, and it was never overwhelming even when it was the best deck. Now they're thinking, okay yeah, Tenyi ain't a big deal, let's give them their Vessel back, and the main Floodgate remaining in the format right now is Winda. So Vessel to 3 is going to let us get our Vish more easily, and therefore deal with Winda more easily too. Fabled on release looked like it functioned solidly, but it didn't really do enough to be meta relevant. But it's got a skill buff, and pretty much the only difference is that you're allowed to summon from your opponent's grave now. So yeah, you can play IDP if you want, but the important thing is that Andraith finally does what it wants to do, reviving an opponent's monster that they discarded. Kinda weird that they didn't let this happen before, but it's gonna happen now. Last time a deck got hit to the brink of extinction, it was Tachyons. I think that the deck really did need lots of hits to weaken it, but at the same time, I gotta admit that they kinda overdid it, and they made it completely unplayable. With the power creep of the game being the way that it is, I think that they wanted to make Tachyons a functioning strategy again, so they gave it a skill buff. You're allowed to put a level 8 dragon from hand to field again, but its effects will be negated, and it has to be a dragon that can be normal summoned. It's not as easy as before the nerf, but it is a piece of extension that the deck really needed, and of course, you are going to be able to search a level 4 or 8 dragon like always. And now if you control Galaxy Eyes Tachyon Dragon, you don't have to pay any costs to put the counter trap or the rank up spell on the field anymore, so you are able to set up somewhat of a board now with the added extension and the fact that you don't need to sacrifice a part of your board for the counter trap. The deck is definitely not going to be at the level it was at before. Felgrand is still limited to 1, but you can play limited to 3 traps if you like, and the skill makes the deck serviceable, but probably not strong enough to be a meta contender. The raise skills all basically let you start the duel with 1500 more life if you have the right attribute of extra deck monster in your extra deck, and they also let you buff the attack of the right attributed extra deck mechanic if it's on your field, but they buffed it so that you can buff any monster that you have if that attribute or that extra deck mechanic is anywhere in your field or grave. But if you're buffing the right mechanic and attribute, then it type gives a bigger boost instead. Not gonna lie, I don't think the attack buff was the reason the people were playing this skill, and I don't think it's gonna make people play these skills now. But if your deck wanted to play these skills before, then now you get a little perk on top of the life gain. World Legacy World Crown was added to the game immediately limited to 3, even though it's an extender and an interruption for link decks that probably weren't going to be playing limited to 3 traps regardless. So I think they took this off the list because it kind of didn't need to be here in the first place. Lastly of all, Power Creep allowed Skill Prisoner to come back. This card prevented targeting so easily that it was put here, but you look at everything around and protection from targeting seems kind of like, who cares? So it's unlimited now. I think the ban list addressed the most important things about this format. All the broken shit going down. Of course, there are still some floodgates and lingering effects going around, but they aren't as big of a deal as the things that were hit. And hopefully, this is going to allow the format to evolve into a much healthier state. This has been the worst meta in a long time. I honestly would rather play Tachyon format than this format, because at least in Tachyon format there was counterplay and decisions. In this format, you just had to either go first or be Dragon Links, and thankfully, that is now changed. I don't care for the way that they're treating Cyber Dragons on this list, but other than that, I would say this is a perfect ban list. But what do you guys think? Is this ban list good? Is it bad? What do you think is missing from the ban list? And what do you think is on this ban list that shouldn't be? And if you like the video, then slap like now, subscribe if you haven't already, hit the bell to see our next video when it drops. Have yourselves a good one, guys, and I've been Undead from Team 6K, signing out.
Hey, why they gotta hate on me? I done got me 250,000 views and they still saying they low key. They ain't wanna come work with the kid, but I'm flexing with Zay on beats. How they ask for a spot at the gym, but they leave all the weight on me. I don't ask them to wait on me. They would ask where they gon' be with a song if they wanted the weatherman. I ain't asking to pay no fees. She was homeless and needed a spot. I ain't ask her to pay no lease. I ain't ask her to say no please. I ain't ask her to make no cheese. Scream fake, but it ain't on me. Got clean so it ain't no streets. Why green if it ain't no keeps? Brought cream so it ain't no beef. My team say it ain't no chief. My demon they hang on me. They seemingly ain't no peace. I seen him, he ain't no beast. For